Well, here we are again, folks, with another episode of the Enneagram and Movie Podcast. We're taking a little bit of a detour from the subtype series we have been doing. I forget where we are in the subtypes or where we will be when this episode airs, but we're like I said, we're going to take a little bit of detour. I'm Mario Sikora. I'm here with TJ Dawe and TJ Ingrassia, as always. How you doing, guys?
Doing very well, thanks.
Doing well, Mario, you beautiful, naive, sophisticated newborn baby.
Yes, an excellent pull from what we're going to be talking about today. So we're actually going to be talking about the TV show Parks and Recreation. And what sort of spurred this is that somebody sent us a clip from a podcast of Amy Poehler talking about the Enneagram. And I do understand she's a big fan of the Enneagram. And she was interviewing Claire Danes, and they were talking about both being type 8s. And it just gave us the idea, you know what? Well, let's talk about Parks and Recreation. It's a show near and dear to the hearts of both of our TJs here, and I have to admit, I had not really seen it before. I'd watched a few minutes of it here and there, just was never really on my radar, so I did watch some episodes, and happy to talk about it. I think there are some great characters and, some really funny stuff in there. So before we get into it, TJ and Ingrassia, I'm going to ask you, I know that you're particularly fond of this show, so why is that?
That's just a really good show. The heart wants what it wants. It was sort of a spin-off. I mean, not a direct spin-off of The Office, but the co-creator, was involved.
Very similar feel.
Yeah, it's got a similar sort of mockumentary kind of feel. Mm-hmm. And The Office has moments of being more serious, I think, at times. Parks is more lighthearted, I would say. Yeah. And just really some legendary characters. Really diversified characters, and I don't know. I just love it for whatever reason.
Good. TJ Dawe, what's your history with this show?
Yeah, well, I was a big fan of The Office as that was airing, and Greg Daniels, the co-creator of this, also co-created King of the Hill, which I think is a vastly underrated show. I think it's just some of the sharpest writing in TV history. And Mike Schur, who co-created this, went on to create The Good Place. So it's got a really good pedigree in terms of the writers and the creation staff behind it. Just an amazing cast. I got into this as it was new. I came in a few seasons in and just grew to love it. I think unlike many sitcoms out there, this is a show where practically everybody in the cast went on to do interesting and notable things.
It is a packed cast, and I was shocked at some of the people who showed up over the course of the episodes, and some of the people who were regulars even. Rob Lowe, for example, is somebody who you wouldn't expect to be in this kind of a show, but I thought he was excellent in it. So, yeah. And I didn't realize it had a shared pedigree with The Good Place, which is a show that I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, Mike Schur has an interesting book about the creation of The Good Place, which I strongly recommend. That's kind of his survey of moral philosophy. It's more that than it is behind the scenes. And Amy Poehler has an autobiography called Yes, Please, which I highly recommend. Great book. And she's done a lot of different interesting things. She's got a career that is worth following.
All right, great. So we decided that we were going to look at, I think, 5 episodes that the two of you chose. So TJ Dawe, tell us a little bit about those episodes and why the two of you picked these episodes to focus on.
Yeah, so we're going to look. There's 124 episodes of the series. So this aired on NBC. It was, not that long ago, but long ago enough that it was broadcast in the era of people tuning in at a given time and place to watch it, and there were 22 episodes a season, so there's a lot of it. And I think it's wonderful how high quality it consistently is. But anyway, a little impractical to do a podcast about the entire series. So we narrowed in on the following 5 episodes. Season 3, Episode 6, Indianapolis. Season 4, Episode 1, I'm Leslie Knope. Season 4, Episode 4, Pawnee Rangers. Season 5, Episode 9, Ron and Diane. And Season 5, Episode 10, Two Parties. So TJ Ingrassia and I did a confab offline to figure out, okay, which are some of our favorite episodes and is there overlap between them? And let's keep this to a reasonable number. And these are the episodes we came up with. The ones that I chose because I thought they did a really good, first of all, they contained some favorite moments of mine. And secondly, I thought they did a really good job of illustrating the personality type of some of the major characters.
We're focused on the kind of the middle of the series. I think there were, 7 seasons,
Yeah.
I believe? Yeah, and so we're focused on seasons 3, 4, and 5. And I did go back and watch some of the early, I think I watched the first 3 or 4 episodes as well. And you can see some evolution in the character, right? Particularly the characters, particularly the Amy Poehler character was much more serious in the early episodes. I thought she was had much less of a sense of humor, I think, or I guess maybe the humor wasn't as broad, I would say. And then it seemed like she kind of relaxed into the character, and it became broader, but in a way that worked, right? I mean, I didn't think that it lost anything, but so there is some evolution of the character, and this makes this a little bit challenging, right? Because characters on TV shows, I think, can end up being more complex over time because there is so much. I mean, we had 7 seasons, that's 7 years at least, and 120 some episodes for the character to evolve. And it can evolve based on writers changing, based on the actor showing a little bit more of themselves or more complicated parts of themselves. And I think that's okay because it's also relates to how humans actually are. When we first get to know them, we see sort of the stereotype of them, right? We see a controlled, very specific face, and it can actually be easier to see their Enneagram type in that way. And then as we get to know them more, we see more complexity, and it can be a little bit harder to see the Enneagram type because we have more data that's contradictory. In time, it sort of settles again, and you look at the big picture and you say, oh, yeah, that's a 5 or that's an 8 or that sort of thing. So with that as caveat, and I'll tell you what, before we move on to looking at the different characters, is there anything either of you would say along those lines?
Yeah, the exact same thing happened with The Office. Mm-hmm. So both Parks and Rec and The Office, the first season is very short, I think about 6 episodes. Mm-hmm. And something that they blatantly discovered with The Office was they changed Michael Scott's motivation completely. So if you watch the first season, he's a lot meaner. And in the second season, they came up with he wants a family. That's his main motivation, as well as to be loved by his coworkers. But that just changed an essential part of the DNA of the character and is a big part of what made that show such a hit. Even some minor characters, if you watch the first season, Kelly Kapoor is much more serious, and she became much more playful and flighty. So yeah, there's an evolution that happens as they make it, and I have to applaud whoever the executives were that were like, give them a chance, give them time to find their voice, because I think a lot of shows need that. And I listened to the audiobook of Nick Offerman, his book Paddle Your Own Canoe, where he talked about his experience on the show, among many other things, and about how the writers took certain things from his own life and gave them to Ron Swanson, like being a woodworker, for instance. So it's a matter of, it really is a symbiotic relationship that a cast can have with the writers and the creators of what do you do best? Or what's working, what's not working? Maybe let's tweak that a little bit. And, it kind of builds in a virtuous circle, which I think it did with both of these shows.
Yeah. TJ Ingrassia, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think in the Leslie Knope character specifically, it's been a minute since I watched the series all the way through, but from what I remember in the first season or so, what's the best way to say this? Leslie becomes much more intelligent over the course of the series. She really becomes sort of a powerhouse, where in the first season and a half-ish, she's almost like the butt of the joke, like this inept government official. But her character really flips. And to TJ's point, just shows take time to get their legs and find where they're going, and I'm glad that they let this show do that.
Yeah, I don't have the depth of knowledge of the show that the two of you do, but I think she not only became more intelligent, but more emotionally intelligent as well, right? She could read people better. She had more of a connection with people. In fact, that's kind of one of the themes of, one of the episodes we watched is her sort of emotional relationship with Ron Swanson. And that was not something that you would have predicted based on the first couple of episodes as we're watching it there. So, and, again, it makes for a richer character, right? I mean, a character who, that character, had it not evolved, would have become boring after the first season. And, any character that's just kind of one note and doesn't have any complexity to it, you're going to lose interest in fairly quickly. All right. So I'm gonna suggest we start with an easy one. So how we're going to approach this is look at different characters and pick examples from different episodes of why we think that character is that type. So I'm going to throw this easy one out, or what I think is an easy one, out to you guys. And let's start with Ron Swanson, played by Nick Offerman, and TJ Dawe. You talked a little bit about him.
Before we do, let me just give a quick synopsis of the series, in case anybody's not up to speed on that.
Oh, yeah, very good.
The premise of the series is it's a mockumentary sitcom focusing on the staff of the Parks and Recreation Department in the fictitious city of Pawnee, Indiana. And the protagonist is Leslie Knope, played by Amy Poehler, and she won an Emmy for her role, for her portrayal of the character in 2015. She's the assistant parks commissioner. The parks commissioner is Ron Swanson, played by Nick Offerman. And then there's a variety of other characters who work in various capacities in the office, as well as Ann Perkins, who doesn't work there, but she's a nurse, and Leslie's best friend, so she's often involved in there.
What Enneagram type and subtype do we think Ron is?
Well, I was going to say, clearly he's a preserver. Can we all agree on that?
Yeah. And woodworking, just before we go any further, when I am assessing clients and doing my typing interviews, one of the things I ask is, what do you do for fun? What are your hobbies? And for male preservers, home kind of stuff, right? Making things, fixing things, repairing things is a dead giveaway. Many preservers like those kind of things. And with male preservers, it is doing yard work, woodworking, all these sort of things. So for me, that is a blaring red flag. So go ahead, continue, please.
And like I mentioned, Nick Offerman does not only woodwork in real life, he runs a woodworking business. He has had articles published in woodworking trade magazines. He is the real thing.
Yeah. All right. So TJ Ingrassia, continue with your assessment.
Okay, so here's where you guys can set me straight. I feel like Ron Swanson is almost like an 8 who is striving to feel detached. Now, maybe there's a lot of the preserving doing some work there, but I feel like there's a strong, whatever he is, it's somewhere on that continuum.
Yeah. Fair enough. TJ Dawe, what do you think?
Yeah, preserving 8 is my guess. And he is extremely private. So there were definitely echoes of the Harrison Ford character from Shrinking in our episode about preserving 5. And by the way, in case anybody's listening to this and they are brand new to the Enneagram, and in case that person is Amy Poehler herself, preserving, navigating, transmitting, these are terms that are not often talked about in casual discussions of the Enneagram, but we believe these are an essential element of what differentiates one type of say, an 8 in this case, according to my opinion, from another type of 8. A navigating 8 is very different from a preserving 8, very different from a transmitting 8. They've got certain things in common, but strong differences that make just as much of a difference as the type.
Yeah. And it's the root of most mistypings that we see, the instinctual biases or the subtypes. We see, for example, a lot of times people who are transmitters being mistyped as 8s or as 7s or as some of the more assertive, aggressive types, people who are preservers being mistyped as, some of the less aggressive types, like a 5, like a 1, like a 6. But you really have to understand these two dimensions in order to fully understand the Enneagram. Because I think this is a great case, and TJ Ingrassia, you make a great point. He's an 8, but boy, oh boy, does he seem to be trying hard to be a 5. But he's just got, I mean, look, he's a guy who fishes with a gun, right? I mean, there's just this, and there's when they take them out camping, for the camp, I forget which episode, with the Pawnee Rangers, right? And he opens up the handbook that he made himself, and it only has one point in there that says "Be a man." Right?
It's hard to imagine a 5 saying that.
Exactly.
Whereas a cartoon version of an 8 would definitely say that.
Yeah. I mean, just everything about him. It's the love of meat that we see, and and the steaks, and the episode where the first one we watched, Indianapolis, where he's dying to go to the steakhouse, and there's the poster of the bare knuckle boxer that he's standing there emulating, right?
Mulligans.
Mulligans, and he's got these pictures of himself, and he always looks exactly the same. And this is my first time. Don't I look like such a young it's the same exact look. And and at the end of that, when he goes to the diner and he's disappointed with the steak, and he says to the guy, "Okay, listen, I want you to bring me all of your eggs and bacon. And wait a minute, because you may have heard me say bring a lot, but I want you to bring me all of your eggs and bacon." I mean, that's 8 stuff, right?
That's preserving 8 stuff.
And preserving 8
and
stuff, absolutely.
If you don't mind for a second, if we just lean into the preserving, because I think this is one of the great preserving characters I've ever seen anywhere. And a lot of the comedy comes out of the fact of what a preserver he is. So that episode, Indianapolis, was one that I specifically wanted to do for exactly that reason. Because the plot that involves Ron, as you said, he's tagging along he's not tagging along. He has to go to Indianapolis for this commendation. But the thing that he really cares about is his favorite steakhouse, and the whole damn state is there. And then when they get there, it's been closed by the health department, and he's devastated. And then Chris Traeger, played by Rob Lowe, invites him to come back to his place. "I'll fire up the grill. I'll make you something." He assumes that means steak. It means portobello mushroom caps. When Ron sees them on the grill, he screams. He's devastated. And then he takes himself to a diner, orders a steak, gets served something disappointing. And as you said, famously, this is one of the most famous moments in the whole series, demands all the eggs and bacon you have. Yeah. Preservers have a thing. Many of them have a thing about, I'm going to eat my favorite thing tonight. Like, there's a lot of looking forward to that. And if that gets taken away, that is a big deal. Like, that is devastating. For somebody who isn't a preserver, it's like, oh, the restaurant turned out to be closed. Oh, that's disappointing. What else is open? Yeah, we'll go there. As opposed to like, no, how can this be? And it's not like it was just closed that night. It's closed indefinitely. And at one point he wonders, like, what do you think happened to the steaks that were in there? Did they get eaten? He's brought to tears. It's like, the fact that he loves steak so much doesn't just happen in this episode. They talk about it a lot, and they make great comedic hay out of it. And I think it's an exaggeration, but I think not too far.
But not by a whole lot, right?
What preservers can be like with their whatever their preserving thing of choice is. It might be food. It might be a specific kind of food. It might be a certain kind of creature comfort or what have you. But it's like that is theirs, and that is the top of their priority list. And they revel in it. They love it, and they can never get too much of it.
So that scene reminded me of when the three of us got together a few years ago in L.A. and TJ Dawe was there already. I got in, I think, a day before you did, TJ Ingrassia. And so we were getting together for dinner, and TJ says to me, do you have any preferences for food? And I think we were exchanging emails or something. And I wrote back, I'll eat anything. I like this, I like that. I said, my only thing is I think that vegetarian restaurants are an affront to humanity. and of course, TJ's a vegan, right? Which I did not know at the time, and I just thought, wow, that was just, in retrospect, that's a Ron Swanson, thing. It's like, a vegetarian, what? What? That's crazy. Don't tell anybody I like artichokes and plums, quiet woman kind of thing.
And there's a scene when he refuses the salad, saying, given that I'm not a rabbit, and then he pretends to eat it and then just dumps it back in the salad bowl.
Right. All right. TJ Ingrassia, what else made you see this character as preserving?
Well, I think for me, when I talk about Ron Swanson and his preserving, this is where some of the 5-ish stuff kind of blends, where it's I'll throw some things out there. You can kind of help explain the nuances here. But He's extremely private and withholding. This is a running theme through the whole series. He has gold buried in his yard. He doesn't give his bank account information to people. He's very guarded about his private life. He's been dating Diane for some time, and the only thing he's told Leslie is that she's a human female and that her name is Diane. So that kind of stuff. And then in the Ron and Diane episode, when Ron goes to the award ceremony for the chair that he made, there's these flashes of what could seem like a five-ish, a super deep dive into a very niche area of expertise. He's excited by this random guy who's this legend in the woodworking community that no one else would see on the street and have any idea about. We learn at the end of the Ron and Diane episode that Ron has this secret life as Duke Silver jazz saxophonist. Again, very private, guarded, and also very niche sort of interest that he has. So talk me through what you see, where those things overlap, and where that could be explained as a preserving eight.
Sure. Yeah, and this goes back to, again, like TJ was saying, the importance of really understanding the instinctual biases and how the instinctual bias can have a really profound impact on how the type expresses itself. A transmitting eight and a preserving eight look like very different creatures. Okay? But if we think about the instinctual bias being the thing that people care about, the things that people care about, the areas of life they prioritize, and the strategy being the way they satisfy those needs.
The strategy meaning the type number.
Yeah, the type number. Yes, absolutely right. And so for the eight, it's striving to feel powerful. And what I see in Ron Swanson throughout is this very strong approach to controlling my domain, right? Everything in him is about, I am doing this because I need to be in complete control of my world. And for listeners, we can go back to the episode we did on the Preserving Eight, which had Nick Offerman as the focus in an episode of The Last of Us. And again, it's this idea of, no, I am the king of my castle. And I will have very strong walls, and I will be the one who determines who gets in and who gets out and all these sort of things. Now, again, it's very different from what we saw with the Harrison Ford character with Shrinking. Same sort of idea. This is my lair of solitude, or my, temple of solitude, or whatever they called it. But it's not this kind of forceful, like, I don't want to say, he's not the character who say, I'll shoot you if you try to come into my house, but you might not put it past him too much, right? At least be prepared to shoot you, okay? So there's just this hardness and this toughness underneath the Ron Swanson character that you don't necessarily see in the Preserving Five.
Yeah. Okay, so let me play devil's advocate, and we have to add the caveat. We'll say this 1,000 times, I'm sure. It's a television show. These are fictional characters. So it's going to present us with scenarios specifically for comedic value that would play against maybe the way a normal human would react. And so the stereotype might be, well, an eight would never run away cowering from their ex-wife, Tammy, and go hide at the cabin in the woods. So what do we do with that, or how do we explain that, or what was your assessment of that dynamic?
Yeah, well, so, ultimately he does say, we can't run from our problems, and he tells the whole nail gun taking off a toe story and, talks about, it was a funny prank and we all laughed, it was his toe getting shot off, right? Again, kind of eight-ish. Look, everybody's, even an eight occasionally is going to run into a foe that they need to, get a little space from.
And Tammy's a formidable foe.
Yeah, and Tammy is formidable, right? When we meet her, it's like, I get it, right?
Played by Nick Offerman's actual wife.
Oh, is it really? Oh,
okay. So Tammy 2, played by Megan Mullally, is Nick Offerman's wife. Tammy 1, I forget the actress's name who plays his first ex-wife, Tammy. Yeah.
Patricia Clarkson, right? And who was I usually see her as kind of a gentler, softer character in most movies, but she even sent a chill up the spine of the Aubrey Plaza character, very quickly when she walked, sit up, do your breasts a favor, sort of thing, right?
Yeah, I think there's a moment. It's in an episode we didn't watch, but I think it's the next episode where Tammy One has more of a presence, and Aubrey Plaza says, like, she's the cold, distant mother I never have. I love her.
But even when he does in the beginning of that episode where he does, he grabs his go bag, right? And he takes that stirrup off of the, shoe shine chair and shoves it into the wall and steps on it, climbs up, tears the thing, it's just, to me, that's just so 8-ish, right? It's, I am prepared. You could tell he had that go bag there in the office ready to go. So again, not really 5-ish, okay? I can see a 5 hoarding a bunch of stuff in their cabin somewhere and all that, but I don't know, just not having that sort of visceral energy.
He's very action-oriented.
Yeah, and this is one of the distinctions between the 8 and the 5, right? The 5 often seems like they're not really in their body, whereas with the 8, they're kind of grounded and in their body and, kind of hard that way. And we see that even the way throughout the series, the way Nick Offerman carries himself, he moves slowly, right? It's like Paulie from Goodfellas, right? Paulie can move slowly because he doesn't have to move for anybody, kind of thing. He's just always has a lot of gravity to him in a way that I don't think 5s typically do.
He's very physically engaged with the world.
Yes.
And a lot of that is stuff that we've already talked about with preserving, just how much he loves eating, but he loves woodworking. He loves his living space. He's also kind of proudly a Luddite and is very conservative in his views about the physical world of like, he likes things the way they are on his terms. So yeah, that it seemed much more like raw and engaged with the physical world than you would generally see with a 5, more removed and cerebral.
We also want to remember that the classical vice of the 8 is lust, and he's clearly has, even though he's not sort of a Lothario type, he's been married multiple times to, and so there's clearly a drive in that way, and just his approach to food and to scotch is very lustful as well, right? So you see, when somebody sits and says, no, bring me all of the bacon and eggs, that's lust in action, right? Kind of gluttony too, but it's like, no, I need this and you will bring it to me. Okay. It's kind of like, King David saying, bathe her and bring her to me kind of thing, right? So,
as opposed to the Paul Rhodes character in Shrinking, who, a motif in that is people bring him candy.
Yes.
Or he's sneaking ice cream. He's not supposed to have it because he's got Parkinson's. So it's a much smaller version of that. It's,
yes.
That's the 5-ish version of engagement with the physical world is some tropical Skittles as a treat now and then, as opposed to give me all the bacon and eggs you have.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't have any data on this, but, just based on that description, I wonder what the average life expectancy of 8s is compared to some of the other types, right? Because of this excessiveness and robustness and, willing to be laughing off losing a toe in a nail gun incident sort of thing. So,
but they live more life in those shorter years.
They sure do.
And in another episode, Ann Perkins, the nurse, at one point, remarks after some kind of a blood test with Ron that he has the lowest cholesterol she has ever observed. That's one of the ways they make comedic hay out of his habits is like he's healthier than anyone. In another episode, he surprises everybody by hosting a call-in radio or TV cable access show. And somebody asks him for his advice on how to beat a hangover. And he says, I've never experienced one. And just talks about how he goes to bed wearing a pair of wet socks and he wakes up feeling fine. So like for all of his excess, he pays no price for it in any way.
All right. So what else about Ron Swanson seemed self-preserving or eight-ish to either of you?
Well, he's such a survivalist. That's another thing, is when he's leading the group of Pawnee Rangers, Boy Scouts, basically, his approach is to, first of all, just show them how not to die. Leslie's got her competing group, and she's planned activity after activity, many of which are just pure fun, whereas his are very simple. I'm going to show you how not to die in the woods. And he's very focused like that. And you get the sense that he easily could. If he was deprived of his gold and his home and his 3 cabins that he has, you could send him into the woods with a pocket knife and he would survive just fine.
TJ Ingrassia, anything from you?
I think we pretty well covered it. I mean, there's, earlier when I said that Parks has some legendary characters, I think Ron Swanson is at the top of that list. And over the course of those, 100-something episodes, there are many, many moments. But this episode had some of the best.
Yeah. There's a few things, for example, when he comes back, from the cabin, or let's see, I think it's when she announces she's going to run for office. I think that's the same episode. Anyway, he comes back to the office and he says, okay, I just want you all to know that I am here. I am back. And if any of you need anything, don't bother me. You're on your own. You're adults. Deal with it, right? Just again, very eight-ish. Look, be a man, grow up. You're an adult. Fix it yourself. Don't bug me with your problems, sort of thing. There's a scene where he says that she keeps repeating something, trying to get him to say something, and he just won't do it. And then he says off to the camera, I just don't say things that people try to get me to say. Somebody asked me if my first wedding was delayed for 2 hours because he said, he wouldn't
repeat after me, and he fell silent.
And so if we go back for a moment to my dietary habits, I will eat anything almost except for peas and lima beans. Okay. And the story I sometimes tell people regarding peas, I don't really like the taste of them. But if I go back to when I was about 8 or 9 years old, my mother was of the school of you clean your plate, right? Children starving in China, we used to hear all the time. And, I would say, well, send them my peas kind of thing. And, and so my mother one night tells me, you need to finish your peas. You're not leaving the table until you finish your peas. And I said, okay. And I sat there, right, with the peas on my plate. And I sat there for a good few hours. And the sun went down. And finally, my mother comes in and says, okay, fine, you win. And I have not eaten a pea since, just to prove my point, right? So, 54 years later, I am still saying, you can't make me eat a pea, right? So... So, yeah, I could relate to Ron Swanson in a lot of ways. I'm not preserving, but I get the 8 stuff. All right.
One more thing to mention about the character is he is in part inspired, I read online, I don't know 100% that this is true, on the legendary John Swartzwelder, who is a legend to the few people who know who he is. He's one of the great writers on The Simpsons, and that's how Greg Daniels knew him. And he was a low government or small government libertarian. And he famously wrote 59 episodes of The Simpsons in its first 10 years, like more than double anybody else.
Wow.
And then he retired to a ranch in California, and he's given one interview in his life, and that was just a couple of years ago. And now he writes and self-publishes absurd detective novels. So one of the titles I have is The Exploding Detective. And they are piss your pants funny. I can't recommend them highly enough. I also recommend just looking up like which episodes of The Simpsons he wrote and watching any of those. He's just a legend as far as joke writing and just how obscure and hard-headed he is.
That's great. All right, good. So I'm going to choose characters here. The Rob Lowe character, whose name in this show is
Chris Traeger.
Chris Traeger, yes. So, and this was interesting because I wanted to go a different direction than I ultimately settled on. But as I thought more and more about Rob Lowe's career, the type I settled on made more and more sense to me. But I want to hear you guys' point of view first. Who wants to take a stab at how you would type Chris Traeger?
Don't everybody jump at this at once.
My guess is 2. He just has an effervescing friendliness and positivity. And I think Rob Lowe is one of those actors that you couldn't bottle up his transmitting if you tried.
Right.
So transmitting 2 is my guess.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. TJ Ingrassia, any thoughts?
I was going to say 7. Now, I can see where the transmitting could be overlapped. If Mary, if you have a different idea here, that the transmitting could be doing some work there. But much like the 7s that we recently discussed, there's an irrepressible spirit, a constant positivity that he finds the best in everything. He makes the most of everything. But now I don't want to jump the gun here, but I hope we can all agree that Andy Dwyer is a 7, Chris Pratt's character.
Yeah.
And so, but if Chris Traeger was a 7, he's a very different, it's a very different feel. So, All right, Mario, your turn.
Well, my perspective, I would go with transmitting 7. And I get the 2 thing because there's even one episode where like when he breaks up with Anne and she doesn't get it. And the voiceover is that his positivity and optimism were such that she didn't even realize she was being broken up with. And in transmitting 2s, you see a more emotional character, right? You see somebody who can be a bit more a little on the scary side when they get, when they're feeling slighted in some way.
This would be Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction is the
That
stereotype.
or Kathy Bates in Misery. And I'm going to suggest, I don't want to jump ahead here, but I'm going to suggest that Tammy too might have been a transmitting 2.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the kind of, and you don't see Chris Traeger stalking the co-worker's daughter, right? Jerry's daughter. That's
Millicent.
I mean, he Millicent, right? He is kind of obsessed with her, but it's not. He's always trying to put a positive spin on it. So I see him as somebody who's just this. Like everything he says should be followed by an exclamation point, right? There's even that scene where she walks, he bumps into her in the hallway, and he says, "I'm sorry, what's her name? Ann
Perkins.
Ann Perkins. You just got to jump. Ann Perkins.
That's a running thing through the whole series. Is he uses first names with an exclamation point like that?
Okay, right. And you know a lot about testes, Ann Perkins. Just everything is just so positive and so bright and so exciting. And when I got to thinking about,
I'm sorry, I have to pause you there. One of my favorite lines of the whole series. It's in that same scene. Anne shows him her phone, and he says, "Wow, your inbox is literally filled with penises."
I gotta say that both of you do a pretty good Chris Traeger. I guess his vocal rhythms
really
are easy
is
to reproduce.
Yeah, it's this sort of, and there's a series, I forget what network is. I watched a few episodes of it that Rob Lowe does with his son. And he plays a Silicon Valley guy, and there's all these sort of things. And that character is very much a transmitting 7. And I mentioned before that I've been rewatching West Wing, and that character Sam is a 7. And I would have, just in retrospect, think about Rob Lowe looks like such a 3. Right, you just want to look. You look at him and you just want to say, "Are you kidding me? That jawline, that guy's got to be a 3." Right, but his more notable characters have that sort of bubbly, bouncy, shrug it off, look at the bright side sort of quality to them that really just strikes me as 7-ish. So I lean towards 7 with this character.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Well, okay, so I was going to ask, so jumping back to Andy Dwyer then, if we agree that he's a 7, but these are 2 7s who look very different, so how would you analyze that?
Instinctual bias.
Yeah.
It's the instinctual bias.
Say more about that.
Yeah. So if we go to Andy, so you look at Andy, and Andy, he's a dreamer, right? He wants to be a rock star. He gets drunk. He falls into the pit, breaks both of his legs, and they're talking to him about his career and what he wants to do. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I want to do this, but I want to be the biggest rock star in the world." But no concept of how to get there. he doesn't have any money, right? One of the episodes we watched is, that's a theme. They're in the bar. He can't buy his girlfriend a drink because he doesn't have any money. That's a navigating relationship with money, right? Just, it's the preserving domain is the zone of indifference for navigators. And so they often just don't care about that stuff. I'm in the moment. I'm kind of, getting along with people. I'm looking at the bright side, just pursuing my interests and floating across life is what we can see with a lot of navigating sevens. So, and he does, there's even a thing where, I forget what he says. Oh, when it was one of the earlier episodes, actually, that was not for this podcast, but they're talking about how the Amy Poehler character is having an affair, or no, had a relationship in the past with one of the co-workers, and then he ends up sleeping with the reporter, and the Chris Pratt character says, "I called that." Right. So again, it's this attunement to sort of what's going on that we often see in navigators, even when they're kind of, not that bright like this character.
So I was going to ask, when you think about navigating, someone who's successful at navigating, they kind of have a sense of the power dynamics and who's in charge, and they can walk into a room and feel it. You don't get the sense that Andy walks into a room and has a grasp of that. So is that he's bad at navigating, or is this just sort of a funny character who's written to be that way?
So there's two things, right? Number one, it's kind of a funny character, but we always want to make the distinction between skillfulness at something and attention and prioritizing of it. Okay. There are lots of people who prioritize navigating stuff but aren't good at it. There's a lot of people who prioritize transmitting things but are not good at it. If, for example, when we get to the Aziz Ansari character, Tom Haverford, yeah, right. He's. I think we can agree he's a transmitter.
Who's bad at transmitting.
Who's really bad at transmitting, right? Because everything fails. He drives everybody away, makes everybody crazy. So, this is a situation where we can have a bias towards something but not be skilled at it in the Andy character.
Kind of like how, and there isn't an example of this in the show, but a preserver might overeat
or be bad with their money. Right.
Exactly. Have all kinds of problems that are related to the preserving domain because they overdo it.
Yes. Yes. Or just never learn the skills to do it well. Right. So, this is something that, honestly, so Claudio Naranjo actually criticized my approach to the instinctual biases when it was described to him because he was told that I said, quote unquote, socials are good at navigating the group. And he said, well, no, that's not the case. But I've never said that, right? So there's a big difference between being skilled at something and being focused on it. The thing I'll point out, because it might be tempting to see him as a preserving subtype because of the emphasis on his health, at least in the episodes that we watched, right? There's the thing about the fat in the eggnog. And, even he says, I don't know if you know this, but things with fat in them taste so much better than things without fat, right? So there's a lot of preserving stuff there, but again, anxiety about it. And this is something that we see in transmitters, right? The preserving domain is the zone of inner conflict. And so there can be this stress and anxiety related to the preserving domain. Transmitters worry about their health and about food and all these sort of things and think, I'm not doing this well, far more than we might expect. All right. Let's talk about Aziz Ansari, his character, Tom Haverford.
Which I had typed as a preserving 7 before when we did our episode on the preserving 7, but that was after not having seen it for quite a while. Now, I think his character on Master of None is a preserving 7. But rewatching this, the way he dresses, the way he's always got some new thing that he wants everybody to know about and be involved in, very transmitting.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and there is a scene where he is getting his shoes shined by
by Andy.
the Chris Pratt character by Andy. And did you guys catch what kind of shoes he's wearing? No. He's wearing leopard skin shoes. Okay. And leopard skin is a classic tell for transmitters. Now, TJ Dawe, and I've never seen either of you wear leopard skin that I know of, and not every transmitter wears leopard skin. But, okay, like woodworking, it is a heavy, heavy signal of, the instinctual bias. And later, when we meet Tammy too, she is carrying a leopard skin purse. And so,
do you mind extrapolating that?
Extrapolating, it's flashy, it's colorful, it's bold. Okay, it's animalistic. Right?
Peacock feathers.
It's peacock feathers. It's a highly sexual, sort of thing without being that blatant.
Hey, check me out.
That's exactly what it is. It says, hey, world, look at me. Okay, you're going to notice this whether you want to or not. So leopard skin belts, leopard skin shoes, leopard skin pillows are often indicators of a transmitting bias. So.
Now, one of the things that had me thinking preserving is in an episode we watched. So it's the Treat Yourself episode. And all of the things that he and Donna Meagle treat themselves to are preserving. Clothes, fragrances, massages, mimosas, fine leather goods. He's so excited to go to the mall. He just loves this mall for some reason, as if it's extraordinary.
But why does he love the mall? There are 3 Burberrys here, right? Everything they're doing was an indulgence. Okay? It wasn't necessarily preserving. It was an over-the-top sort of indulgence, right? I'm a cashmere velvet, cashmere candy cane, he says at one point, because he's wearing a cashmere sweater and a scarf and velvet pants and cashmere socks and all these things. It's so that with the transmitting bias, it again looks like preserving because it's related to well-being, resources, etc., but it's indulgent stuff.
Now, maybe we're jumping ahead here, but would a distinction here be that when Ben Wyatt goes with them on Treat Yourself Day, and the thing that he treats himself to is a pack of white socks? So could we say that maybe that might be something that a preserver might be more inclined to treat themselves to as something practical that I need?
He was a preserver among transmitters on that trip, right? And I have a son who is a transmitting 9, and my son is all about the bling, right? And we think of 9s as being, humble and self-effacing and all this stuff, but he's a transmitting 9. So he came to me a while ago, and my wife and I, and he's 19 now, and he said, have I ever told you guys what my goals are by the time I'm 25? And we said, no, Lex, what are they? And he says, to have a BMW, a Rolex, and a Louis Vuitton duffel bag. Okay. And when he went to Japan with his friends, he went to shop, basically. And he came home with a Louis Vuitton belt that he couldn't wait to show us. And he said, but Dad, getting it there, I saved $400. Okay. You saved $400, right? So it's just this, it's, and you might say, well, he wants transportation and he wants to be punctual and he, wants to be able to, carry all of his, luggage or something. So that's preserving. No, that's the way transmitters do these things. So anyway, that was a great episode for transmitting as far as I was concerned.
Now, preservers do indulge. So imagine 3 preservers having a Treat Yourself Day. What might that look like?
So it could still be some of the same things. Okay, it could still be getting a massage, but it would be much more about the massage than look how awesome this place is. And even there's the scene where, what's the name of the woman who goes
Donna.
with them? Donna. Yeah, thank you. I thought I had it written down here. So Donna goes with her, and there's the point where she says, needles in your face?
Pleasure in your base.
Pleasure in your base, right? So it's, so the acupuncture stuff in the face, there was even something very sexual about that, right?
And then when Ben got the acupuncture in his face, it was the most stressed he's ever been in his life.
Exactly right. So again, and that right there, can be a good draw between what is the preserving experience and what is the transmitting experience of this. Yeah, so that is a great example of how transmitters will indulge, whereas preservers, it's going to be much more sedated. Yeah, I love this. My wife loves massages. My wife loves facials, all that sort of stuff. But it's more about the way it makes me feel, right? It's relaxing. It's rejuvenating. It's refreshing. It's not awesome in that way, right? It doesn't make me, stand out and be awesome in the same light.
Okay, so that's the instinctual bias. What is your opinion of Tom's strategy?
Yeah, so there's certainly kind of a 7-ish feel, and I think probably that actor is probably a 7, but it was written more like a 3, right? The focus is more 3-ish than anything else. So I think that's an example of a character's or an actor's personality type. I don't want to say distorting, but influencing the expression of it. Because again, very different from the Rob Lowe character, right? The transmitting 7 tends to be lacking in guile most of the time, right? Whereas the transmitting 3, they're very methodical. They've got an agenda that they're going after, and they're willing to, shall we say, paint a picture that may not be the full reality of something in order to get what they want. And I think we see that with Tom Haverford all over the place.
Yeah, I was going through the list of derailers for type 3 with Tom in mind, and just the high-level bullet points: spin and wanting to look good, taking on too much, seeking recognition, individual contributor syndrome. Seems like when Tom is going to the low side, it seems pretty 3-ish to me.
Yeah, I thought so as well.
Tom
TJ?
Also has a lot of sudden interests. So in the episode Indianapolis, he's pitching this fragrance that he's come up with to Dennis Feinstein, the great perfumer. And he talks about how this is his dream. Well, something that doesn't come across when we just watch a selection of episodes is he has never mentioned this before. It's not like that's a running thing for his character. That's introduced, that begins and ends in that one episode.
Right.
And then in another episode, when he's got swag for his new company, he doesn't even know what the company does. It's called Entertainment 720.
720.
Yeah, but like he doesn't have a master plan. It's just like, I want to do something. I want to conquer the world. I want everybody to know who I am. But he hasn't thought past that, other than I'll get swag made and I'll throw it around. And that's something that Andy has a lot going too, as another 7, is he's just kind of put a shiny object in front of him and he wants it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is, I would say that this is probably kind of a crossover character for me, because one of the things that we see is there's at least, and again, I'll say my experience is limited because, it was focused on a handful of episodes, but even the Scrabble thing where he's playing Scrabble with Ron and he is purposefully letting him win, there's almost like a political motivation behind it, right? There is a scheming that is sort of happening that is in service of his advancement and betterment, right? So there is this thing about, I think one of the things I noticed with Tom over and over again was how much about how awesome he was. And everything he did was in service of making him look awesome in some way, which feels like more of a 3-ish thing than a 7 thing. Okay. Even though the 7s, transmitting 7 can seem pretty self-absorbed, it's usually not about how awesome I am. Whereas with a transmitting 3, that tends to be what the focus is. But again, there's arguments to be made, I think, because there is a lot of 7-ish stuff, like you're pointing out, TJ. But I also see a lot of transmitting 3 stuff.
It's interesting to imagine a young Tom Cruise playing this role, and just how that would have skewed it in a slightly different direction. It wouldn't have been 100% different, but it definitely would have had some strong differences.
It would have been a, well, you know what? There is, and this is something I noticed, this whole show has a very Seven-ish feel to it, right? There is this sort of Seven-ish layover, right? Like it's a lot of bouncing around. It's a lot of absurdity, a lot of screwball kind of stuff. Even though it's not kind of like the broad screwball comedy, it still has that feel of, just all this crazy stuff happening all over the place. And we're sitting back observing it and watching these people just sort of pinball around. So yeah, I just found a whole Seven-ish influence. And I think you could look at almost every character except for Ron Swanson and make some argument that there's some version of a Seven almost.
A lot of short scenes too. It's an ensemble show. So everybody has something to do in a given episode, and the episodes are only 22 minutes long. So a lot of scenes are like 10 seconds, 20, 30 seconds, and then boom, we're on to the next thing. And then when we come back, something has happened.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Let's talk about the Ann Perkins character. Thoughts?
I didn't get that much of a sense of her character from these episodes. Like, I've seen Rashida Jones typed as a 9, so I had that in mind, which that's a mixed blessing to go in with already a sense of what a person or a character might be. So I kind of had that going, but I wouldn't be able to argue eloquently of like these, X, Y, and Z are very 9 things that she does.
Yeah.
She is pretty easygoing. I'll say that.
Yeah. Yeah. TJ Ingrassia, you?
Yeah, I was going to say 9 too. I don't think it's not over the top. She's probably the closest thing to the straight man in the series. Ben Wyatt's pretty straight that way as well. But yeah, there's the episode where Chris breaks up with her, the Indianapolis episode, and she's unaware of it. I would be careful about playing into stereotypes here, but there's almost a sense of like a, not a naivete, but she's just kind of going along with it. She's friends with everyone, not assuming anything bad. I don't know. Yeah, if I had to pick, I would pick 9, but yeah, I wouldn't die on the hill for it.
She's like very attractive wallpaper, right? No, I would go with 9 also, right? And I didn't have that preconception that you mentioned, TJ. I hadn't seen her. I don't know enough about her to have come across that. Kind of a navigating character, right? And again, she is sort of in many ways, she's the stand-in for the audience, I think. And there are those times where, she'll kind of, people will do something and they go to her for the reaction shot, right? Of, yeah, did you see that? Kind of thing. So, and again, that's a very navigating thing of picking up on things that other people do that, the person themselves might not be aware of what they're doing. Not a strong portrayal, but that's one of the things about 9s, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, what would a very strong 9 look like? It would kind of look like this, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. And particularly with the navigating 9, one of the things that happens with navigating 9s is they get lost, right? They get, they turn over their identity almost to all the people around them. And early on in the first episode, her whole life is kind of revolving around Andy, and she's taking care of him and, cleaning up after him and doing all, working a double shift and then expecting to come home and having to take out the garbage kind of thing. So she's kind of put upon in a lot of ways like 9-ish characters can be. And there's this scene when they're the Pawnee Rangers where she's just again, and I don't know, I would have liked to have had time to watch the episode leading up to that, to seeing why she was kind of in the doghouse. But the whole episode was around everybody ignoring her and she had to go and buy the fish and stand by the water, with the fish on the line already for 2 hours before she brought it in, just to kind of get some attention and, get back on it.
To get all the teenage boys interested in her.
Exactly right. Yeah, like she would have had that problem, right? So anyway, yeah, I'd go with navigating 9 for her.
In the episode I'm Leslie Knope, when her inbox gets flooded with dick pics, she doesn't like it, but she takes it pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not, and they're all sent to her as a matter of like, is there any medical advice you can give me? You are a nurse. So she
and initially she goes to Chris, volunteering. Hey, I looked at the picture and this guy probably has mumps.
So yeah, she's kind of that calm ground that 9s often are.
Yeah. Yeah. And 9s often are good straight people for, kind of screwball environments like this. So like Jim Halpert in The Office, right? So he's the stand-in for the audience who's seeing all this craziness going on around him. And every so often he just looks over at the camera and, raises an eyebrow or something. So, all right. Okay, let's touch on Jerry for a moment, the man with the largest penis that doctor had ever seen. Which
good for Jerry.
Yeah, and I'm surprised they didn't come back to in the when you find out that Christy Brinkley is his wife.
Oh, is that who that actress is? Okay.
Oh yeah, and look, you're a youngin', but boy, back in my day, Christy Brinkley was the thing, man. So it made it even doubly absurd. It's kind of, and that's kind of a playoff of, she was married to Billy Joel, right? And there's that scene where, Jerry's playing the piano and she's, but not even playing it. There's a scene where his hands aren't even moving and, that sort of thing. But so anyway, any thoughts on Jerry?
Well, along with him having the biggest penis that doctor has ever seen, so big that it distracts him from actually medically examining him. A runner about Jerry is he's got amazing things going for him that he doesn't talk about, and he doesn't even seem to realize he has going for them. So he's got a giant dick. He's married to a gorgeous woman. He's got 3 gorgeous daughters. In another episode that we have not watched, they established he's an excellent painter. In the episode of his Christmas party, we see just how many friends he has and what a great host he is. And
too good of a painter, it turns out.
Yeah. And he's really good at playing piano, even though the actor isn't too good at faking it, and so on and so forth. So all of this, to me, indicates that he's a 9. I think he's the happy to be low status. He's the pariah of the office and doesn't resent it at all. He's always the butt of the joke. He keeps dropping his ice cream cone. Bad things always happen to him, and he'll say, "Oh, geez," but not hold any animosity towards himself or the world or anybody like that. He's just the happy subordinate.
Yeah, it's he's not one of the more prominent characters, although there are some storylines where his life is prominent, but it's usually in this absurdist sort of way and this who'd have thought that kind of way. And so 9 makes a lot of sense to me. I was thinking 2 at some points, right? I mean, there is this sort of, I don't know. There was the scene where Rob Lowe hugs him, and at first he's a little bit awkward, but then he says, you can kind of see him enjoying it. But again, probably more 9-ish to me. I don't think that the instinctual bias was clearly defined, at least in the episodes that I saw. I don't know that I'd see preserving in him, maybe more navigating, maybe transmitting, but kind of a secondary character. I thought.
Well, he loves his ice cream. That could be a preserving thing.
Could be.
On the Bachelor episode, that's his one thing he wants is to go to his favorite ice cream parlor, and he's such a regular there that the guy behind the counter is just used to how often he drops his cone and always has a second one ready.
Right. That's
so kind of like we talked about with Ron Swanson, a preserver having their favorite preserving thing they look forward to, they go back and they do it again and again. It's a highlight of their day or their week or what have you.
Yeah. Could be. Yeah. So I don't have a strong.
I forget where it is in the series, but it turns out at one point that his name isn't even Jerry. His name is actually Gary. early in his career, somehow there was a name mix-up, and he just decided not to. He didn't want to rock the boat, so he's just been Jerry for the last 25 years or whatever.
That's very, very Nine. Yeah, that screams Nine. All right, good. Okay, so we have a couple more, and obviously we're kind of saving the big one for at least later that we haven't gotten to yet. But let's knock off a couple of these other ones before we get to the Amy Poehler character. Let's see. So the Aubrey Plaza character, April. Thoughts?
April Ludgate, played by Aubrey Plaza. I could see an argument for 4, and I could see an argument for 5. She's very much got a sourpuss kind of attitude of like, I hate everyone and I hate everything. And the shining exception to that, which we do not see in the 5 episodes that we watched, is animals. She's got a sentimental love for animals. And my partner is a preserving 4, and we did a lot of ribbing as we watched this show, especially when she would gush for animals at one point, saying that they should be rewarded for not being people. So there's very much the hatred for all human beings of like everyone and everything sucks, which, again, you would see abundantly with both a 4 and a 5.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. TJ, how about you?
Yeah, that's
TJ,
sort of exactly what I would say. Some sort of a melding of a 4 and a 5. She doesn't have the I was looking at the derailers for type 4. Rebellion for rebellion's sake, that feels pretty good. She loves drama. She loves indulging drama, encouraging drama in other people, but she's not necessarily a very dramatic person herself. She's pretty detached and actually she sort of becomes the protege of Ron Swanson at one point of the arc of the series. So yeah, I think there's sort of some of both going on there. What did you think, Mario?
Yeah, I again, based on limited episodes, a little hard to tell, but I had kind of a strong navigating 4 feeling, just kind of an intuitive feeling for her, right? Again, somebody who is, I would say, also kind of the perspective of the audience in a lot of ways, right? There are those episodes where her reaction is, kind of a stand-in for what, kind of like I saw that too, sort of thing. And there is this. There was the scene where the Pawnee camp, and they're doing the arts and crafts, and she draws on her arm a girl watching her mother being trampled by a buffalo. Yeah, look, all the blood's pouring out of her face, kind of thing. It just had that kind of dark, outcast sort of thing. So, kind of the distinction among 4s, the more dramatic 4 is the transmitting 4, right? That's the Nicolas Cage, I lost my hand, kind of, thing. That self-pitying, dramatic, operatic sort of quality. The preserving 4 is more the aesthete, right? The focus on the environment and the beauty and the kind of the wabi-sabi character of, life. Whereas the navigating 4 is more the outcast sort of character. I don't belong here. I'm looking for a tribe that I fit into, and it would be just another tribe of people who don't fit in anywhere either, sort of thing. So that's the direction
feels very much like her. Not just in these episodes, but thinking about her over the course of the entire series, that's very much April.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I'd go navigating 4. And again, can look 5-ish, right? Because there is that sort of remote quality that the navigating bias brings in.
And I think at large, or in general, 4s are pretty rare in sitcoms. And I say this as a 4. Like if I look back on certainly my years growing up, and I watched a lot of conventional sitcoms in the 80s, I can't think of any characters that even then I thought of like, that feels like me. I relate to that guy. If I was in that world, I would be him or her.
Yeah, they just bring everybody down.
Exactly.
I mean, who wants that in a sitcom?
But again, in this case, like they make comedic hay out of just how bitter and dour she is and how much she likes raining on other people's joy.
Yes. All right, great. So let's talk about Megan Mullally, a kind of a bit character in in only one of the episodes.
Well, we've also
watched,
got Ben
Tammy
Wyatt,
too.
just to mention him. I think he's the
Oh
other
yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, okay. So the Megan Mullally character. Anybody here disagree that she's transmitting?
That sounds good.
Yeah. I would probably go with 2 on her. At least, again, I only saw this one episode, but she is kind of a stalker, right? And she is very much a seductress sort of thing. And this belies this idea that all 2s are helpers, right? This is one of the reasons that I don't use the helper as the 2, because nobody would look at this character and say, oh, yeah, she's a helper. No, she's a seductress.
She's striving to feel connected to Ron.
Yes, and sparing no expense.
Right.
In order
And
to
then
try to
feeling
make that
connected to
happen,
Leslie suddenly in the dumpster scene.
Yeah, that's
and she's
right.
got that aggression.
Yeah, so
That like
exactly
the 2 goes
right.
to 8 of like suddenly I go from sweet, like even having like almost a baby girl speaking voice, to being
Yes.
physically aggressive.
Yes. Yes. So, and that is the distinguisher between the transmitting, is a distinguisher between the transmitting 2 and the transmitting 7. With the transmitting 2, it's like, yeah, things go wrong. This chick could kill me, right? Whereas, you don't really feel that with 7s necessarily.
Ron warns Leslie to protect her eyes because she's a gouger.
Yeah. So Megan Mullally is great. So I know her. I remember her from Will and Grace. I don't know if she was clearly transmitting in that, but I don't think she was a 2, as I recall. Maybe more 7, maybe 3. I don't know. It's been a long time, and I was never huge on the show. But anyway, that's what I saw here, transmitting 2. And so let's go with Ben Wyatt. We already talked about him potentially being a preserver. I think that's pretty consistent. There's a couple of things, right? So there's buying the socks on
Treat yourself.
on Treat Yourself Day. Treat Yourself Day. Yourself, yeah. Treat Yourself Day. There's the clothes that he wears and kind of not changing his clothes and, staying in a motel and not getting too connected to people, all that sort of thing. There's this scene where he's sitting on the bench by himself eating soup, kind of thing. Now, he's mourning a breakup as well, but still there's just that. It's that I don't want to get too connected to these people. When he gets invited to go to the club, he, it's just not his thing, right? He's kind of, keeping to himself, again, in the way that preservers tend to do. Right. And, now Ron Swanson is extreme. He doesn't want anything to do with anybody. But most preservers, they're a little bit torn. Yeah, I kind of want to do it, but I really want to go home too. So they might be more willing to do it, but it's not their thing. I don't know. Any thoughts that he's anything other than preserving from either of you?
He has a whole career working in institutions and government. Like part of the backstory that we don't get in this episode is that he was a mayor while still in his teens. And in another episode, they established that he was part of the Model UN when he was in high school. Like that was his big favorite thing. And he works pretty well in government. Like he seems to fit in just fine in an institution. So that signifies more navigating than preserving. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so good point. And again, that's backstory that I didn't have. He seemed to me to be kind of a classic. One of the things you see in preservers is that they're really good in stable environments, right? And government and, government agencies, police departments, hospitals, all that sort of stuff. There's consistency here. There's deliberateness. I don't have to think that much about it. And, preservers, they do want to get ahead, right? I mean, there are preservers, they want to make money. They want to be successful, all these other sort of things. But they will be drawn to doing it in a more stable environment. Okay. I also think his type came into play here on some of those things. His ability to kind of navigate things well. I'm just going to come out and say it. I think he was 9. I think he was a preserving 9. And so the preserving 9 has this ability to get along with people, right? They can be very likable. But one of the things you'll find with preserving 9s is you think you know them, right? You're kind of connected to them. They're fitting in. They're engaging with people. Then you realize, wait a minute, I don't actually know anything about this person, right? But they're able to give you the feeling of giving you just enough connection to keep you off their back, right? And just enough of the maneuvering so that they don't have to invest too much of themselves. And so I would think, that whatever success he had within bureaucracies was that combination of the two things. Yeah. The other thing is, again, we go back to the socks, right? The indulge himself as in the big bag of white socks. And there was that great scene where they finally convince him to treat himself to the Batman thing. And he actually starts crying and says, I have to learn to treat myself. And this is a classic thing we see with preserving nines is they often don't feel like they deserve something, right? At the heart of the nine is this, I don't feel like I'm a good person, really. And so I have to take myself out of the way and I have to put other people's needs first, or at least appear to be doing so while getting my own needs met. And so I kind of put myself down. I minimize myself. And I always refer to it as suicide rather than self-sacrifice. Okay, the self-sacrifice is, hey, I want this, but I'm going to give it to you. Whereas with the preserving nine, it's often, I don't really need anything. I'll be fine. You take it. Okay. And this underlying resentment because why shouldn't I deserve something too? This is the thing they feel. And that's the growth path for the preserving nine is to be able to say, no, I want something. I want to get my needs taken care of, and I will. I don't know. Thoughts, pushback, feedback?
Yeah, I was thinking something 9-ish or 6-ish, somewhere on that continuum, I thought, but I think you make a good argument.
To me, it was a big question mark. I actually didn't have a strong opinion to voice, but as you say that really connects to the scene in the episode Two Parties, where it's his bachelor party, and we're going to give you what you want, and what does he want? Beer and board games. And have either of you ever played Settlers of Catan? Do you know that game?
Just a little bit, yeah.
It's a real game.
No
it
clue.
takes hours and hours and hours to play. There's a lot of rules, and Ben mentions that he's nationally ranked. And he's playing in this episode with all people who have never played it before. And the few times I've played it, I'm one of those people. There's a lot to remember. So somebody who knows the game can definitely trounce somebody who's new to it. But it's involved. It's lengthy. And they keep saying, like, are you sure you don't want anything else? Are you this is all you want? And it was like, yeah, just this. He's very low key. Yeah. When he gets to call the shots, it's something as modest as that.
Yes. My mother is a preserving nine, and she was a nurse when I was growing up. And after work every day, she would come home, and she would take out her little book of crossword puzzles, and she would sit on the sofa and put this blanket over her legs and have 3 little tiny miniature, Three Musketeers or Milky Way, little chocolate things. And you used to talk for an hour. You don't talk to her, right? She never really said, don't talk to me, but you knew, you don't talk to mom during that period. It's just that this is my little cocoon that I need to create. And look, I'm not demanding a lot, but I also don't want you to mess with it. Right. So this is my thing. And so you often see preserving nines kind of creating this cocoon world for themselves. So that kind of game would fit right in because I can get lost in this and disappear in a way.
There's also the episode I'm Leslie Knope where Leslie decides to run for city council and she has to break up with him. Yeah. And she's terrified to say it. And she keeps trying to break up with him and then go in the opposite direction. And then he's eventually the one that presents her with the button for her campaign. He's already figured it out. He understands. He's fine with it. He makes it easy for her, which seems pretty nine-ish to me of like, no muss, no fuss. Even though we find out later, he's hurt by it. Like he's sad. And he starts to have he starts to question, why do I still live here?
Right. Yeah. And this can be part of the myth about nines is that they really are self-sacrificing. They don't care. They don't, it's fine with them to give up things. They don't feel it. No, it hurts them just as much as it would hurt anybody else to not have their needs met, right? To not be paid attention to not be valued.
To go through a breakup.
But Yeah, to go through a breakup. They seem to be fine on the surface, but they feel the pain just as much as anybody else does. And that pain can build up, and this is where we get the kind of going postal syndrome, right? If we think of the Michael Douglas character in
Falling down.
Falling down, thank you, and that sort of thing. It's the kind of the 9 who has said, you know what, man, I'm sick of this. I'm going to stand up for myself.
Or you get him dressed as Batman crying of like,
Yes.
I was finally able to do something nice for myself and release some of this pent-up tension.
Yes, yes.
And then he keeps wearing it at home.
All right. All right, so let's move on to Leslie Knope, the Amy Poehler character. That is why we kind of started this, because of her love for the Enneagram. So thoughts on on Leslie Knope.
So one of the reasons that I chose the episode Ron and Diane, and that's the one where Ron's nominated for the Woodworking Award, is you see just how over the top her connection to Ron is, in terms of how it comes out. She's had a Google alert for his name for 7 years, and it finally paid off. She's so excited to meet Diane. She's so excited to go to this thing that he didn't tell anybody about. When she meets Diane, she bombards her with questions about what are your 5 biggest hopes, dreams, fears, and regrets. She wants to know what Hogwarts house she'd be in. She's so approving of her, and then gets so defensive of Ron when Tammy 2 shows up. So that to me seemed pretty 2-ish.
Yeah, TJ?
Yeah, I agree. I've always been conflicted about Leslie. I feel like Leslie is this character where if you take a lot of 2 and a fair bit of 1 and a fair bit of 3 and put them all in a blender together, and we can talk about maybe there's some instinctual bias that's doing some work there. But yeah, I think if you boil Leslie down, striving to feel connected really feels like that's the ultimate core of who she is. You know, she's also striving to feel outstanding in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of ways where she's striving to feel perfect. She has lots of binders and wants things done a certain way. But ultimately, I think most of that ends up being in the service of the connection that she has with the people around her.
Yeah. So again, I don't have the knowledge of this show that you guys do. And in addition to watching the episodes we chose that are from the middle of the series, I did go back and watch the first few. And I watched the first few episodes with my wife. And at least in the first couple of episodes, I would have gone with Navigating 3. And in fact, my wife even at one point said, that's Tracy Flick. Right, from Election, the Reese Witherspoon character, and that I couldn't help but not make that connection as well. It really did seem like a, classic Navigating 3, putting on this particular image of, being, skilled and political and all of these things. But as the character evolves, I would agree with you. There was this more emotional connection thing that came out, particularly in the relationship with Ron. But you also see it early in her, obsession over the coworker. I forget his name, the one that she slept with once and was still obsessed with, and he was kind of
Mark
different
Brandanowitz.
toward her. And yeah, thank you. Yes, so
it was a
true
deep
fan
pull.
of the show. Yeah, right. So yeah, she really did have that. Now, I think she's in Navigating too. And again, it was all about, this is an example of where this attraction to politics is navigating rather than preserving, right? It's not because this is a good, stable, consistent job where I'll, have a steady paycheck. It's more, this is an opportunity to make an impact and an impression in a way. And one of the things we see with Navigating twos is that they do look 3-ish, right? One of the reasons I think that you guys know my feelings about the Wings, that it was a kludge to fill in a lack of knowledge of the instinctual biases
kludge?
and the subtypes. Oh, kludge, yeah, it's an engineering term where basically you've got a problem and so you fix it with duct tape and bubble gum, right? And what can happen is that the kludge can become part of the system. And as you continue to improve the system, you're stuck dealing with this kludge, and you have to face this choice: do I continue on with this, weak link in the system, or do I go back and start all over again, right? So, yeah, kludge is an engineering term for, a kind of a quick, sloppy fix. And that, for me, is what the wings are, right? They're a quick, sloppy fix for explaining variation in type among people who really weren't aware of or didn't fully understand the instinctual biases. And when you go back and read Risso's personality types, he even has this in a very lengthy footnote, right, where he says, he calls the wings subtypes in that early work. And there's an extended footnote where he talks about, there is this thing about these subtypes, and we're not sure how rigorous that idea is, and we're still exploring it, et cetera, et cetera. But the kludge became part of the system, okay? And, for a lot of people, they're not willing to go yank it out. So I say all this to say that the so-called 2 with a 3 wing, you could look at that and say, oh, she's a 2 with a 3 wing. Clearly, you can see that 3 stuff. No, it's the navigating bias and the expression of it, that if the 3 wing is the only language we have for it, we can use it to explain what's happening there. But it's more related to the navigating bias.
Yeah, ultimately, you're describing both systems. It's just looking at the way humans operate in the world and giving a name to it. So your system is just a more it's a more elegant, refined, less kludgy way to describe those behaviors.
Yeah. I think so.
Navigating thing that's big about Leslie Knope is that she thrives in a system. She loves being in public service. She loves being connected, like as part of a superstructure. Like that is like navigators tend to do well in those environments. It doesn't bother her at all that there's all these people to check in with. There's forms to fill and there's boxes to tick. She is happy to do all of that. She builds a life doing that. And in an episode that we don't see in the five that we've covered, when we see her home, it's filthy. She has no housekeeping skills whatsoever. It's all stacks and stacks of work material, of binders. The only thing she really cares about in terms of her living space is continuing to do the work that she has to do at work.
So that's really interesting. And it's, again, one of the things we see in navigators, right? The navigators, they have this indifference to the preserving domain. And usually that means they're just, their nest isn't that interesting to them, right? It's a place where I lay my head. I remember years ago having a client who was a, very high, he was the head engineer for a big company who's, had thousands of employees, very successful guy, and he was a navigating 9. And I remember him saying one time, if it was up to me, I could live in a cardboard box, right? I have a really nice house, and my wife loves it and my kids are happy there. But to me, it's like, whatever, right? There's this indifference toward it. And so that's, again, consistent with the profile.
So another prominent episode of Leslie that we do see in the 5 episodes we watched is ambition. So when she gets asked to run for city council, she does one of those talking to the camera saying that she's always wanted to go into politics. And she had an action figure of Geraldine Ferraro that she made out of a popsicle stick. Or in the episode, the Pawnee Rangers, she's very competitive with Ron about how, like, my Girl Scout troop is better than your Boy Scout troop. Different names, but still. So it would be very easy to see that as 3-ish.
Yes.
But just to address that myself, since I brought it up, her desire to run for city council, it takes somebody else to reach out to her to do it. And then she's torn about having to break up with her boyfriend in order to avoid a scandal of any kind of impropriety because he's her boss. And she keeps trying to break up with him and not because she's so welded to wanting to be connected with him. It breaks her heart to break that up. And then same with the Pawnee Rangers. She's competitive with Ron. She keeps wanting Ron to admit that her group is better. but she's knocked herself out to create all of these fun activities for the girls. And she's come up with awards for everybody, and she's full of praise for everybody. So it's like she's competitive in a very two-ish way.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And, so again, if we think of the instinctual bias as what matters to people, then navigating is what matters, right? How do I be in the world and understand the world and make sense of the world and figure out where I fit socially? And the strategy is striving to feel connected by connecting to people, right? And what better way to do that than through this? And really, this series is her. You talked about Michael Scott wanting to build a family, and I think it's a very similar theme here, right? This is almost her collecting, kind of all these misfit toys and bringing them together to create this environment. Like, again, I watched the first few episodes and then I kind of tuned in again mid-series. But these people who were, kind of peripheral characters, the Rashida Jones character, the Chris Pratt character, they're not working for the government when we first meet them, right? But they bring them in that way, and I'm assuming that she brought them in somehow. So she's collecting people and supporting them. And another thing we see with particularly the navigating too is this: it's almost like they want to be the power behind the throne. And, her idealization of Ron Swanson is, no, he's the guy. I'm here to make sure that he's successful as the guy and that everybody knows he's the guy because I see something in him that I am going to bring out and share with the world. So again, it's all about her subordination to him, her willing subordination in order to lift him.
And Ron is perfectly happy to let her do all the work.
That's exactly right. And, I had a client say to me one time, I hadn't thought of this in years, but he said to me, he was an 8, and he said, an 8 could only marry a 2 because 8s are so self-absorbed, they need somebody to be just as absorbed in them as they are.
Present company excluded.
Yeah, well, yes, I did not take that marriage advice, but Ron Swanson, we could say that, he's kind of doing it.
Make a good team.
Leslie doesn't want Ron's job. And she doesn't resent how grumpy and solitary he is. If anything, she loves those things because that gives her more to do. So anybody who walks in the door who wants attention, no matter how crackpot their desire is or how much of a crackpot they are as a character, she is happy to give them all the time in the world. I am here for you. And part of that is protecting Ron because she gets that about him. He's solitary. She respects that.
Yeah. And she also, there's a scene early on where she's going to be interviewed by a reporter and she's just panicking, right? And she goes to the other guy, TJ, you mentioned his name earlier, the guy that she had slept with the one time. Thank you. Yeah, Brandanowitz. And she's not good at the transmitting thing of giving an interview, right? She has real anxiety about it. Again, the transmitting piece is the zone of inner conflict, right? So she's much better behind the scenes, much better moving the pieces around in ways that are more nuanced and less public.
Another thing that stood out for me was just a brief thing she says to the camera when Tammy 2 shows up at the awards ceremony. And she says, this may be the hardest challenge yet for Leslie Knope, emotional guardian. And that just... she describes herself as Ron's self-appointed emotional guardian, like, hello, type 2. But then she says that Tammy makes her question her stand on using the B word. Maybe just this once. No, Leslie, fight it. And something that I'm pretty sure I've read about, I've definitely observed this, is 2s, particularly 2 women, absorb a dictate that they have to be nice and sweet. That it is not okay to be mean, even when someone deserves it. There's almost this exaggerated politeness.
And I think that's more common in the navigating too, right? we wouldn't see that problem with Tammy 2, the transmitting 2. Okay. And so, again, this is where the instinctual biases are really, really important and where they really come to play. It's the navigating 2 is, with navigators, it's I care what people think about me because I don't want to be ostracized. I don't want to be kicked out of the group. I want to figure out where my place is, and then I don't want to jeopardize that place. And so I identify the behaviors that will get me kicked out of my position in the hierarchy, and I'm very careful not to do them. And I figure out what those ones are that'll keep my position in the hierarchy, and I continue to do those, right? So there's very much this sort of reading of expectations of other people. And I think, again, with the development of this character, again, as you get to know this character better through the series, you see more of the real person, right? In the early episodes, again, I would have said navigating 3. But in retrospect, I can see the hints of 2-ness that I might have overlooked earlier because there was so much 3. But again, I think that was the act, in a way, that we see in navigators. We were talking about this like it's real people. But, good writing, good acting, good art portrays reality. And the Enneagram is reality. And so we see it in well-done TV series and movies like this.
The conclusion of the arc in the episode Ron and Diane with the awards ceremony is Diane telling Leslie that she's not concerned about Tammy 2 as a threat to her relationship with Ron. She's concerned about Leslie. She said, I'm a middle school vice principal. I deal with hormonal psychopaths all the time. What concerns me is you. And then Leslie has no idea what she means until she spells it out. You're the one who knows all the intimate details of his romantic history with that monster. And then point to Leslie's credit as a 2. She takes this in and shares it with Ron and owns up to it. Which is like, I know when your birthday is. I know that you secretly love artichokes and plums.
Quiet woman. Yeah.
An episode that we did not watch shows exactly how Leslie knows Ron's birthday, which is she did a lot of detective work to find it out. And then she's thrilled and she lords it over him. She's going to throw him this lavish surprise party like he hates. And then she gives him the birthday party he wants exactly, which is solitude, scotch, steak, and war movies.
Yeah.
Bridge on the River Kwai.
Yeah, and the Dirty Dozen. And it's like, that to me is healthy too, of like, I see you, I know exactly what you want, even though it's way different than what I would have wanted or what I might think you could benefit from, but I will give you that. But I thought that scene of her owning up to it to Ron was just a really good moment of self-awareness for a 2.
Yeah. All right, good. Well, we have covered a lot of ground here. One of our longer episodes here, but we covered a lot of characters, a lot of great characters. Guys, I'll thank you for forcing me to watch Parks and Recreation. It was a show that I was always aware of, but was never really something I said, oh yeah, I've got to carve out time to watch that show. So I'll probably go back and watch more of the episodes now. Any final thoughts before we move on, before we wrap up?
It is a great show to rewatch if anybody has seen it out. It was a joy to rewatch these episodes because it's so rich in moments. And the deeper you get into the series, the better the writers knew the actors and the characters and were able to write for them. So once you have a gist of, or have a sense of what the gist of each character is, you see just how many good jokes they found for each of those characters. Yeah. Another thing, we did not have anywhere near the time to discuss the many, many, many supporting characters there are who aren't in the credits. And TV critic David B. Cooley co-authored a book called TV the Book, where he and another critic list the 100 best American TV shows. And this is in it. And they liken Pawnee, Indiana to Springfield on The Simpsons in terms of it's a small city, but seemingly they have everything. And they had a lot of actors come back again and again. They also had a lot of cameos, a lot of like bigger name actors than you expect to see in 1 or 2 episodes of a sitcom.
And Newt Gingrich.
And sometimes people appearing as themselves. Yeah, a lot of athletes too.
Yeah. All right, great. Well, so that is it. So we're going to wrap it up here, and with the next episode, we are going to get back to our march through the 27 subtypes. So until then, folks, grab some popcorn, enjoy some shows, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.